I went back to the inpatient ward, cut through the lobby, and headed for the elevator bay. The doors to one elevator were just starting to close, so I quickly squeezed through them. There was already someone in the elevator. Oh, excuse me. I apologized offhandedly for my intrusion. But the moment I laid eyes on this other person, I couldn't help gasping. It was a girl in a school uniform, the same navy blazer as Yukari Sakuragi had worn when she'd visited me the day before. Did that mean the girl also went to Yomiyama North Middle? Shouldn't she have been at school at this time of day? She was petite and slightly built, and had an androgynous face, the bone structure of which was too fine, pure black hair and a shaggy bob cut. Her skin colour was quite washed out in contrast. I'm not sure what to call it, but it looked like white paraffin, to use a somewhat old-fashioned term. Plus, the thing that caught my attention more than anything was the white eye patch bandaging her left eye. Did she have some kind of eye disease? Or had she been hurt? With my mind caught up in all these thoughts, I was embarrassingly slow to realize the direction the elevator I'd chosen was traveling. It was going down, not up. I wasn't headed for the upper floors. The car had started moving toward the basement. I looked at the buttons arrayed on the control panel and saw that B2 was lit up. Letting my own button selection slide, I seized on an impulse and spoke to the girl with the eye patch. I'm sorry. Are you a student at North Yomi? The girl barely nodded her head, silent, showing no hint of any other movement. You're going to the second basement level. Is there something you need to do down there? Yes. But it's not... I'm dropping something off. Her tone of voice was cool and detached, as if all her emotions had been shut off. Half my body is waiting there. The poor thing. While I stood bewildered by those enigmatic words, the elevator stopped and the doors opened. The girl in the eye patch slipped silently past me and went out into the hallway, her footsteps making no sound. Something sickly pale protruded through a gap in her hand, pressed tightly against her chest. My eyes fixed on it. I could see something pale. A tiny doll hand. Hey! I held the elevator doors open and stuck my head and shoulders out to call after the girl. What's your name? The girl, the only person walking down the dimly lit hallway, reacted to my voice and came to a momentary standstill. But she didn't turn around. Mei, she answered curtly. Mei Misaki. Then the girl walked away, as if gliding over the linoleum floor. I watched her go, not breathing, while experiencing a touch of despondency, and at that same time, a foreboding that I could hardly find words to describe. Look, I said, and took a deep breath, just as I had at the doll gallery. I walked up to stand beside Mei, who stood next to the window. Look, I've wanted to ask you this for a while now. It's been bugging me ever since I transferred here. I thought I saw her shoulders tremble slightly again. I pressed on. Why do they do that? Everyone in class, even the teachers, it's like you're not... Without letting me finish my question, Mei replied in a murmur. because I don't exist. That doesn't... I took another deep breath. But... that doesn't... To them, I'm invisible. You're the only one who sees me, Sakakibara. What would you do then? Mei turned her face slowly toward me. A shadow of a smile flashed in her right eye, the one unobscured by the eye patch. Was it my imagination that made me see a tinge of loneliness there? No. That can't be true. If I closed my eyes then and opened them, say 3 seconds later, would she have disappeared right in front of me? For a moment, such thoughts had control of me, and I hastily shifted my gaze away to the world beyond the window. It can't be true. That was when it happened. I heard the sound of someone bolting up the stairs. The footsteps were frantic, completely out of place in this situation, with the entire school wrapped up in test-taking. Even as I wondered what was going on, I saw who it was. A figure wearing a navy blue sweatsuit. It was Mr. Miyamoto, one of the gym teachers. I was still sitting out of gym class, but I knew the name of the head teacher and what he looked like at least. Mr. Miyamoto came towards us and opened his mouth to say something, but in the end ran up to classroom 3 without a word, opened the door at the front of the classroom and called in, "Mr. Kubadera! Mr. Kubadera! Could you come over here?" After a moment, the language arts teacher, who was in the middle of supervising a test, stuck his head out from the classroom. "What's going on?" His shoulders heaving with his ragged breathing. Where Mei and I were, I could just barely hear what he said. "We just got the news." And that was all I heard. He had lowered his voice partway through. Mr. Kubadera's reaction when he heard Mr. Miyamoto's news, though, I could interpret clearly. As soon as he heard whatever it was, he became speechless and his face stiffened. "I see," he replied sullenly, then went back into the room. Mr. Miyamoto looked up at the ceiling, his shoulders still heaving badly. Finally, the door Mr. Kubadera had shut was flung open, and a student came flying out of the room. It was the class representative, Yukari Sakuragi. She looked to be in complete turmoil. She shared a few brief words with Mr. Miyamoto, who stood near the door. Then Sakuragi grabbed her umbrella from the stand outside the classroom. It was a beige stick umbrella. Then, her legs tangling, she started to run. At first, she headed toward the east stair. But then, who can say why, that impulse was checked and she seemed frozen in place. It seemed to happen the instant her eyes locked on us, standing by the windows in front of the staircase. The next moment, she had spun around on her heel and started running down the hall in the opposite direction. It looked as though her right leg, which she told me she'd twisted after a fall, still hadn't healed completely. Her run was awkward, trying to favor it. She ran off down the hallway that ran east to west and soon disappeared from my view. She'd gone down the west stair on the other side of the building. I wonder what that was about. I turned back to Mei. "What do you..." Mei didn't react in the slightest. She stood frozen, her face ashen. I moved away from the window toward the sweat-suited gym teacher and tried asking him. Mr. Miyamoto, what's going on with Sakuragi?" "Huh? Oh." Mr. Miyamoto looked at me with a grimace on his face, as if scowling at me. "Her family was in an accident. We just got an urgent message for her to go to the hospital right away." I wasn't sure whether he was finished or not when it happened. There was some kind of violent sound, and a short, shrill scream echoed up the hall. What was that? Immediately, I felt intensely unsettled. What just happened? I started running down the hall before I could give it much thought, as if I were chasing Yukari Sakuragi, who had just run down this same hallway. I bounded down the west stair, the same she'd gone down, to the second floor. I didn't see her there. I started to run from the second floor down to the first. And instantly I saw it. A bizarre, horrifying scene filled my vision. At the bottom of the wet concrete staircase, at the landing between the second and first floors, was an open umbrella. A beige stick umbrella. The one Yukari Sakuragi had just taken out of the umbrella stand. And draped over the top of it, Sakuragi herself had fallen, face down. What? Her head lay over the center of the open umbrella. Both of her legs were still 2 or 3 steps up from the bottom. Her hands were thrown out at different angles in front of her. Her bag had tumbled into a corner of the landing. What had happened? What could have possibly... It was hard to comprehend at first sight, but right away, I could get a general idea. In her upheaval after learning of her family's emergency, she had flown from the classroom in a scramble, and her foot had slipped partway down the stairs between the first and second floors. The umbrella she'd had in her hand had flown out in front of her. The impact of hitting the ground had made it open, and it fell onto the landing. The metal spike at the top end had landed pointing exactly in her direction. And then... she had radically lost her balance, and the force of her fall had brought her toppling right onto it, as if she'd been floating through the air, unable to do so much as turn her head or put her hands up. Sakuragi's body didn't move at all as she lay there. A nauseating red colour was eating away at the beige of the open umbrella, spreading across it. That was blood. A huge amount of blood. Sakuragi? I called out to her, my voice shaking. My legs trembled as I climbed down the stairs, making my way fearfully down to the landing. My eyes fell on a new horror. The tip of the umbrella had skewered Yukari Sakuragi's throat, crushing it, sinking all the way to the base. Profuse amounts of fresh blood gushed from the wound. How? I turned my eyes away, overwhelmed by the sight. How could this... I heard a sudden thump as Sakuragi's body rolled to one side. The shaft of the umbrella that had miraculously... No, that had, through balance born of an evil coincidence, so far supported her weight, now snapped. Hey! A loud voice came from overhead. What happened? Is everyone alright? It was Mr. Miyamoto. Behind him were other people, teachers who must have come out of the nearby classrooms. It's bad! Call an ambulance! Mr. Miyamoto shouted as he dashed down the stairs. And call the nurse's office right away! This is awful! Are you alright? I nodded. Yes, that's what I meant to say, anyway. But all that came out of my mouth was a groan. A sharp pain lanced through my chest. I'm sorry. Putting both hands to my chest, I fell up against a wall. I don't feel so... I had started tottering up the stairs when I saw Mei in the hallway on the second floor. She was standing behind the teachers, looking intently down at us. Her face was ashen to the point of death. Her right eye was wide to the point of popping. Like the doll inside the black coffin in the basement display room, Her slightly open lips seemed about to make some appeal. Mere seconds later, when I made it back to the hall on the second floor, she was no longer there. When the next class started, Mei had vanished from the classroom. Naturally, no one but me paid it any attention. As soon as lunch started, I went over to Mei's desk, farthest back in the row by the windows that faced the schoolyard, and gave her desk a fresh inspection. It was a wooden desk, of a clearly different shape than the rest of the desks in the room. The chair that went with it was the same, like something that had been used dozens of years ago. An incredibly old desk and chair. Why was that? I asked myself, feeling behind the curve. Why is Mei's desk the only one like this? But now I'd decided to ignore the watchful eyes of those around me, so I sat down in her seat. The surface of the desk was notched all over and uneven. I doubted it was possible to fill out a test. There was a lot of graffiti among all the cuts in the desk. Most of the graffiti was old. Extremely old. Like the desk. Some was written in pencil, some in pen, some carved in, probably with the tip of a compass. Some had almost vanished. Some was only barely legible. And there, in the middle, my eyes fixed on a row of letters that looked freshly written. They were recent. They were written small, on the right edge of the desk, in blue pen. There was no real way to judge the penmanship or anything, but as soon as I saw it, I knew that Mei had written it. Who is the Casualty? That was what she had written.